cycle, or going through the teaching and learning cycle, you do dip in and out of sections a lot. And I found that there has been quite a lot of crossover with where I've gotten up to. I have done a lot of crossover there. So the culminating task, sort of overall learning goal for the students as part of this unit, is that I want them to be able to write a paragraph, probably not much more than that, describing the female reproductive system. So the first part of the teaching and learning cycle is developing or building knowledge of the field. And this has been a really interesting part of doing it. So I have, we've done lots of brainstorming, so I know what the students do and don't know. And then I've presented them with, so as Bev spoke about, the idea of message abundance. So we've done, like, they've looked at lots of diagrams, we've looked at images, we've also spent time watching a brief video that was really accessible to them. So very visual, not too many words, and we did numerous viewings of this video as well and unpacked it in a lot of different ways. At each stage of the teaching and learning cycle, you know, it's important to keep the students focused on what the overall goal is, which, if I go back, is to write a paragraph. So I constantly remind them, so why we're learning this is that we're going to be writing a paragraph about the female reproductive system. But at each stage, there's also success criteria, and having success criteria at each stage gives them an indication about how much they really are learning. So some examples of the success criteria when we're just building knowledge of the field, just two examples are, I know the names of parts of the female reproductive system, and I can label the parts of the female reproductive system on a diagram. And I think I haven't, and using these really explicit success criteria has been terrific for them to actually, you know, they have a real sense of achievement. Oh, I know this and I know that. So it has been really valuable to incorporate that at lots of different layers. Moving on to the second stage of the teaching and learning cycle, we've worked on supported reading. So because the students in my class are very low literacy, I have had to modify all of the texts that I've given them. So there's options for depending on the ability of your students. So perhaps you probably want to expose them to more than 2 texts if they're sort of in the upper end of academic levels, but for my students 2 texts is definitely enough. And as I said, I had to modify them quite significantly to take out information that was irrelevant and might have confused them a little bit. So we have done lots of modelled reading, shared reading and collaborative reading together of the 2 texts, and we have spent a lot of time unpacking them and doing different activities like cloze activities, sequencing activities and matching activities, which has really given them a more in-depth understanding of the terms. So some of the examples for the success criteria that I've used with this aspect is, I know what the purpose of the text is, I can find the important terms in the text, and I can find the verbs in the text. So I try to make the success criteria really accessible for them so that they know what they're doing. And again, making the success criteria really explicit has been terrific for them to be able to feel that sense of achievement. So this is currently where I'm up to with my students, working through the teaching and learning cycle. It does take quite a long time. I don't see my students, we have a lot of interruptions in our learning, but it has been really terrific to use this model, which I would have to say, despite doing a dip ed in teaching and a Masters of VicTESOL, I'd never actually come across the teaching and learning cycle before. So, you know, I've learned a lot as being a part of this. So just a few reflections on implementing the model so far. I think that really explicitly unpacking each element of the teaching and learning cycle has led to really strategic, focused and targeted lesson plans and activities in the classroom. I think inherently we follow the teaching and learning cycle, but making it a little bit more explicit has been really, really worthwhile, I think. The female reproductive system is actually quite a challenging unit for my students because there are so many new terms and ideas and concepts that they aren't necessarily familiar with. And I think using the teaching and learning cycle and really unpacking the way that I've delivered it to them has led to a really high understanding, and I've been really impressed with how much they've gotten out of it so far. Also, using the success criteria at each stage has been really beneficial, so they know how much they're learning. And lastly, I just have found that students have been engaged with both the topic and the teaching activities as well. So hopefully once all of the resources are out there on the internet, even if you don't teach VCAL or if you're not teaching the female reproductive system, hopefully there are lots of really useful aspects of it that you can sort of dip in and out of and apply to your teaching setting. Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca.